Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cafecito Break. I am your host, Rosangel Perez, La Shamanesa, where every Monday we welcome you and invite you to be a part of a conversation. At Cafecito Break, we say we may not have all the answers, but we can start the conversation. And in 2017, we shared some of our intentions earlier this year, which included wanting to include other perspectives in the conversation so that we can make it bigger, so that we can have more pieces to fill in this journey, this delicious journey called life. Today on Cafecito Break, we are truly excited and honored to be having a conversation with such a remarkable woman, Mary Rodwell of ACERN, Australia Close Encounter Research Network. Uh, let's just get right into the interview. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Ruthie Gooten from Plano, Texas, who's my co host.
Hello there. It's not good morning this time. We're actually doing the show in the evening because there's a time differential with our wonderful guest. So I'm going to just jump right in and do the bio because I'm so excited about the subject matter. Mary Rodwell is the founder and principal of Australian Close Encounter Resource Network. Born in the United Kingdom and eventually migrating to Western Australia in 1991, she currently resides in Queensland. Mary is a former nurse, midwife, and health educator and was employed as a professional counsellor for the National Health Service UK and Australian counselling agencies Silver Chain and Centrecare. Since 1994, Mary has worked in private practice as a professional counselor, hypnotherapist, metaphysical teacher, researcher, author, Reiki Master, and international speaker. ACERN's primary role is to offer professional counseling, support hypnotherapy, and information to individuals and their families with anomalous paranormal experiences, particularly specializing in abduction-contact experiences. Mary is recognized internationally as one of Australia's leading researchers in the UFO and contact phenomenon. And with that, I welcome you, Mary. Welcome to our show, to this amazing discussion. And I would like for you to take this opportunity to tell us about your background and to bring us up to date and to just take this show and we will follow you wherever you want to go with this discussion. Welcome.
Thank you both. And it's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk with you and also to share a little bit more of what, I believe is the most important in our history right now, is understanding that we're not alone, despite what you're told in mainstream media and what have you, and how the very fact that if you're seeing something strange, that it's not real and there's something wrong with you. The most important thing that I've discovered in my work and research as a counselor, I've worked with people who've had anomalous experience, over 3,000 individuals to date. And these are families, these are, with children that have had experiences. It doesn't matter if what your belief system is, whether you don't even believe in, extraterrestrials. It doesn't matter, because if you're meant to experience it, you will. And for many people, it isn't because they believe in this, it's because it's happened to them. And it's an experience that they can't ultimately deny. And many of them are fearful. Many of them think there's something wrong with them, they're going crazy, and that's primarily because the truth is you're not told the truth. The truth is that we're educated to believe that this is not possible, and that there is no such thing as extraterrestrials or interdimensionals or all these beings actually visiting us. And that truth embargo means that many people are frightened because they think there's something wrong with them then if they're seeing little beings coming into the room, or they feel they've been taken somewhere on some unusual craft and seeing, a range of different forms, which may be humanoid or may be other forms like what a lot of people see are, the greys, but there are many, many different types of intelligences that are humanoid or otherwise. And the bottom line is that they will still question their sanity because they're not told the truth, that there is a truth embargo on this information. And because of that, people are, misunderstood. They can't even tell their families, or they can't tell those even close to them often because, their family doesn't know the truth of it. So they do question whether they're okay, whether they're psychologically sound. So it's because of this that many people are frightened, not because it's always the experience itself, but because of the judgment that they'll get from those around them that don't know that they're uninformed and don't know the truth, that our governments are behind the scenes, have been hiding this reality for 70, 80 years or more because they have known that this is real. So what has happened for me is that when I discovered after my very first client that came to me and said, I've heard you're open-minded, and said that, for this, people just think you're crazy, there's no support groups. And from that very start, fortunately, I'd read a few books on the subject because it's the nature of who I am. I've always sought to look into the weird and the wonderful and the unusual. I had read a couple of books that said, that this is real, that people are having these experiences, and one of them was a professor of psychiatry, Dr. John Mack, who sadly has passed on now, wrote a couple of books about his belief this was real. But meeting people with this experience and seeing the integrity and the authenticity, their experiences not only by themselves but often their families, which makes it, even more compelling, left me in no doubt that this was a reality. And of course, since that time, I've written a couple of books on the subject about the accounts and the stories and the reality and how this has changed them forever. And nothing changes you unless it's a reality. You don't get changed by an hallucination or a fantasy. And that is the exciting thing, because what I've discovered through their experiences is that not only do they change, but they change in extremely transformative ways that give me hope for this planet and for our species.
So have you noticed an increase in the number of cases and reports that you're seeing in recent months?
It's been exponential, really. I mean, a lot of people talked about 2012 as expecting some kind of major happening. Well, the major happening was more subtle. And for many people, adults that have, if you like, awakened or been activated in, about their own experiences have happened around that time in the last, 4 or 5 years or around that. And that's what I think 2012 was about. It was more about a trigger or an activation of consciousness. And absolutely, it is incredible now that, every day, I'm getting 30, 40 emails, and many of them are about saying, this has been my experience all my life. I've been seeing spirits. I've been seeing energy fields. I've seen different types of beings, never knew who to talk to, buried it for a number of years because I couldn't deal with it and because people didn't understand. But now I can't deny it anymore. I've got to own it. And this is what I'm discovering is happening now. More and more people are coming to that realization that if you like, that understanding that who they really are, rather than just this 3D person that goes to work every day to pay the mortgage, and life is what we're taught to believe is really just about raising the kids and having a short retirement before we pass on. They're realizing that many of them have come in with a mission, with a purpose, with something to do that is to help this planet in its crisis time, which I think is now.
Well, that's, to me, that's something that I have been seeing more and more of. It is, like you said, exponential. I know that in recent months, there's been a lot of discussion about Antarctica and about the secret space program. And there's more and more information that's coming out that's really basically illustrating the fact that our governments know far more than we have been told. So that's one area, if you don't mind, that I'd like to talk about. But I'd also like to hear what your thoughts are as far as the little children that are now being born. Are you seeing a difference in their telepathy, in their level of consciousness, in their skill levels, as opposed to those when you first started practicing?
Well, that's the fascinating thing. I mean, I'll get back to Antarctica in a minute. One of the interesting things is that what we know of having extraterrestrial or interdimensional contact is that it's intergenerational. In other words, if you've got an individual having the experience, his parents or their parents or grandparents will be also very aware of the non-physical, that, you know, they may be clairvoyant or mediumistic or fascinated with UFOs. And so it goes down family lines. The interesting thing is that what I've understood from my research is each generation is, if you like, more aware, more conscious, more activated. And the new children coming in, the Homo noeticus, they're called, letter people by Dr. Olson, who is in my second book, talking about, the new programs of children that are far more activated, multidimensionally aware and more conscious. And one of the things that I was told many years ago by Tracy Taylor, who was an experiencer, saying the new babies coming in are able to override the dominant conditioning and programming that normally occurs on this planet. And their DNA has tenfold the amount of information. They're telepathic. They can manipulate time and space. And they are conscious of their abilities. And it's natural to them. And their molecular structure even it vibrates faster and is accelerated. And these are the children coming in from, over the last few generations, particularly since 2000. And these are the ones I'm writing about. Their stories are, they already recall past lives, not just on Earth, but on other planets. They're aware that they are connected to many of the intelligences visiting this planet and interacting with us. They see them as their real family, even though they've got a human family. They're aware of their abilities. They're aware that they've come in with a mission and a purpose. And they're also being taught and helped to operate not just from their innate awareness as a new kind of human, but also because they're taken on craft and they're being taught on craft everything that is the real truth of who we are, our origins. They're taught physics. They're taught about time and space. They're also taught to use their paranormal, we call them paranormal abilities, but they're actually innate in all of us, which is how to use, a young 8-year-old told me that when she was taken on the craft, she was shown how to levitate. She was also shown how to use her psychic abilities, activating her third eye. And she said that she was also able to control the element of the wind and clouds, that she could control that through her abilities. So they're aware of it. For them, this isn't something that's needed to be activated. It is already innate in them. It's the adults that are going through this activation, if you like, or this awakening, and finally realizing just who they are. So that's the difference now, is the new ones coming in, and this is what confronts the parents, because the parents are still questioning, is this real? Am I really, what I'm feeling, is that accurate? Can I believe it? All those kinds of questioning because of their programming. The children don't question. They just know because they're already operating in a multidimensional reality, and their struggle is to try and manage this limited and limiting 3D reality that their parents are operating in, and they struggle to explain to the parents, but that's not what I'm seeing. You're telling me reality is this, but I know from my experience, my reality is actually multidimensional, and I am seeing so much more than you are. So then you've got this problem between the parents and the children, where the children are trying to articulate how they perceive things, and how difficult it is for them to, appreciate the 3D reality because it's not relevant to them in the way it is to the rest of us.
How old is the youngest child that you've worked with?
Well, I haven't actually worked with the smaller children. This is testimony often from the parents, although I have talked to 5 and 6-year-olds. Usually the parents, the children that have been younger than that, I've only had a very limited conversation with them. So the parents tell me some of the things that they've spoken about, and they ask me, what can I do about that? What can I say to them? And how can I talk to them about it? But certainly the youngest has been about 4 or 5. I talk to a lot of 7, 8, and 9 and 10-year-olds on their accounts, which is fascinating. The important thing is to realize that they've still only often got, the vocabulary of a child. So they sometimes struggle with some of the concepts that they're aware of, but don't always have the language to articulate it. But it is fascinating when you've got a 10-year-old telling you that he came through a portal in the sun, and that when he was 7 or 8, he was given formula to create portals. And then you get an 8-year-old describing to you genetic engineering that the beings have shown her when she was taken up on a spacecraft to a planet, and actually shown how they will do genetic engineering in different species, including animals and plants, etc. And, what 8-year-old knows about such concepts as genetic engineering and DNA? You've got to say to yourself, that isn't the language, that isn't the information that children under 10 would normally talk about. And these are complex subjects. I remember one 8-year-old saying to me when he was trying to tell me what he was learning on board craft with other human children, 2 of them who he recognized from school, and other children that weren't human because of the way they looked. And he said to me, lots of complex information. So I actually said to him, what kind of complex information? He said, I can't tell you because it's too complex. In other words, it's too complex for me to understand.
Right.
Mary, you know what I mean? This is the kind of way they will speak about it.
Wow.
So when Rosangel, I can hog this conversation, so you can jump right in.
Oh, I had so many questions. 3,000 conversations. What were some of the similarities that started jumping out at you as these conversations were unfolding, that you started seeing like threads where this told you, oh my God, this is so much bigger?
I think it's like most researchers. I mean, initially I was working with more adults and individuals, and what you start to see is patterns of experience, because what we have to understand here is they're not all identical in the sense that we're all different individuals. We've grown up with different programming. We've grown up with different ways of interpreting our reality. For example, if you've got a very religious person, for example, who will say they've seen an angel, for example, another person may say, I've seen a light being that's not religious. So often we will interpret it through the lens that we've been programmed into, or the 3D reality that we've been programmed into. But what you do discover is there are patterns of experience, just like, when children, when we're children, if you have an extreme phobia or fear of clowns or Santa Claus or owls with big eyes, you may not realize that's a classic indicator you've possibly had encounters, because they will use a screen to portray either one of these images, when in fact in many cases it's actually a gray. But you will not realize that phobia or that fear actually originates from having an encounter. For example, fear of passages, fear of the closet, because often that's how they will appear coming from, those places. So what I've done is, when I get similar experiences from many, many different people, I will see that then as a pattern or an indicator that there's been an encounter happen. With the children, the difference is that they're a lot more open about their paranormal experiences. They're not afraid to tell you. They're not afraid to say, well, this is what I see and this is what I experience, because they haven't yet found a way to shut down or feel they should shut down because they're not aware how it's necessarily going to be judged. So the difference is with them, they're quite open about what they see, the beings they see, their communication with them, how they understand them. And, when you get an 8-year-old telling you how they understood the Big Bang, and that there was actually things going on before the Big Bang, and explaining to you how many thousands of years old and sometimes millions of years old some of these intelligences are, and he's all of 8, explaining to you this kind of thing. So the difference is that they're generally a lot more open until they learn that it's not okay to talk about this. And that happens often from, 6 or 7 or 8. And as they're getting older, they're more careful about what they'll share because of the response, perhaps, of others to that kind of information.
That's fascinating. When these children are taken, is it always a physical experience, or can it be an energetic transport?
It actually can be both. Sometimes they'll explain, they're aware that they're out of body, and they'll explain that that's how they've been taken to learn things, just as adults will go out of body in some of their encounters. Other times, like this 8-year-old that I spoke to, who told me that when he goes up on the craft, because he's connected very much in terms of his soul origin, is like a mantid being, one of these tall, mantid-looking like beings, insect-looking like beings. They're his family. They're his soul family, and he told me he'll go back to that, that form when he passes on, when he dies. He explained to me that when he goes up on the spacecraft sometimes, in his human form, he will evaporate, or his soul or consciousness will evaporate into a mantid form, and he will operate in that mantid form. And I actually said to him, what does it feel like? Well, he says it feels a little bit strange, but he wasn't fussed by it. He wasn't frightened by it. So he was aware that when he goes up on the craft, sometimes he doesn't stay within his human container at all. He will actually go into the form that is part of his soul connection, or his soul family form. So these are very complex understanding and awareness that these children have, that, about the ability of the soul to move in and out of various forms or containers. And, an extremely complex thing for an 8-year-old to try and explain to you, his only way was he evaporated, was the way he described it.
Oh, wow. Mary, one of the questions, one of the reasons that I was really excited that we were going to have a conversation with you today is because one of our missions here on this show is, like we mentioned in the beginning, to help bring bigger pieces together. And I come from a very traditional Catholic background where anything other than that traditional religious mindset was considered demonic. And with so many young people awakening and adults connecting and reawakening, there's a lot of people who don't know where to go because they don't really find a connection, or they don't feel safe going maybe to their therapist. They may be put in the mental part of the hospital, and they may not feel comfortable going to their religious organization. So people like yourself are needed, and not, there are not as many of you out there. What is your advice for people who might be listening to the show, who feel like they are in desperate need to connect, to discover if they've had an experience, if it's not just dreams that they're having, if they've actually had these close encounters?
It's a very good question, and it's one I address actually in my second book, The New Human, Cosmic Consciousness or God. I call it the God chapter. And the reason I do that was that I was actually brought up Catholic. And for many years, that was very much, what I subscribed to until I started to expand that understanding, that spiritual understanding. The problem is that for those that are, and I get many who are in conflict over their spiritual beliefs or their religious beliefs, because not every church, if you like, actually, as you say, will see this as a positive thing. They will see this as demonology or whatever. I address this in detail that the Catholic Church, believe it or not, is and Monsignor Corrado Baducci, before he passed on, he was a demonologist who actually said this is not demonology and it's not a psychological illness, that it's real. And he was very clear. And, he was a demonologist attached to the Vatican and spoke about this on Italian television and what have you as well. There are others within the different ministries that have written a little bit about the understanding that all we need to do is reinterpret some of the things in the Bible in a way that we see through the modern vernacular. And Reverend Carter, who is a minister who is in the book, he explains why he wrote 2 books on how to if you like, evaluate this from a religious, biblical perspective, and he wrote two wonderful books about it, which I mention, in The New Human, but also a story of a gentleman who is been a minister for 40 years, and I call this coming out of the space closet. He has been speaking the dogma of his church for 40 years, but said in a very brave statement in my book that he felt a hypocrite because he's been experiencing extraterrestrial contact for over 40 years or more, and also he was aware of past lives, both of which were not part of the church doctrine. I mean, Reverend Carter, by the way, wrote alien scriptures, extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible, and the other one was A New World, If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness. So that was Reverend Michael Carter, who's written about those. And he's a wonderful gentleman that allowed me to, put a little bit of his story in my book. He had an instant healing by the extraterrestrials as well. I also wrote in the book of the reverse of that, which is in a way strange, a young Indian man who wrote to me and said, Mary, I know I'm a starseed, but my problem with my culture, my family and those in the culture, they interpret extraterrestrials as gods, so they worship them. And he said, and of course I can't say to them that who you're worshipping are not gods, they're actually extraterrestrials. And his big dilemma is knowing that innately within him who he is and the understanding of his culture, but finding it really difficult to own his truth because of that. I've had others that have come from more strict religious perspectives like Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and being terrified. And one young man from in Australia told me, I think his parents were Mormons, and he said to me, the problem is, Mary, I know that it doesn't fit for me what they're telling me I have to believe. And he outed himself with them, and all he got was judgment that there was something wrong with him, and that he was, and in fact he was almost suicidal because of it. So it is a big, big issue, and I think it's one that's not really being addressed by the churches in the way that it needs to be. And I'm basically saying that in that chapter, that we have to now say to these churches, more and more people are waking up and seeing these beings, and to terrify them, to label them all as demons is one of the worst possible ways that you can ever damage someone, because if they're terrified, then they're going to stay in that place of terror most of their lives unless they have someone who has a broader and more expansive view of this and can help them to understand. Just like interactions with angels, or if they feel, Uncle Joe or their family is in spirit supporting them, the same thing is going on with these non-human intelligences. They're in the same domain. This is not separate. This is also part of their, if their clairvoyance or their awakening or their psychic awareness. As they open up, they will see not only angelic beings and spirits and elementals and fairies and all those kinds of things, including non-human intelligences of a vast range of physical, extraterrestrial, and interdimensional beings. That's how it works. It's not separate. It's all in the same box.
I've often wondered if it's the frequency at which we vibrate that allows us to see certain things. For example, are there spaceships out there right now that we may not be visibly able to see because they're vibrating at a different frequency, or maybe they're cloaked? So as we increase in consciousness, we will be able to see a different depth of perception.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, when I was just rereading an account of a young 8-year-old telling that had told me over Skype that when she was being brought back from being taken on a spacecraft to be shown things on Mars, she said the spacecraft can cloak itself when it delivers her back so that everyone can't see that it's there. In other words, she was fully aware of these, at 8 years old, that the craft can cloak themselves, but also that if you're meant to see one and you are connected to them, they will allow you to see the actual craft, but not necessarily be available to others as well. So we have to understand that as our frequency is being raised, we are seeing more and more of our multidimensional reality. And Dr. Lena Olson, who is a molecular biologist, who is also an experiencer, she was actually explaining that she understands it from this perspective, that on this planet now, we are separating out into two frequencies, the high-frequency people and the low-frequency people, and the soul is making a choice. Do I want to stay in 3D, or do I now want to shift and raise my consciousness to experience a higher form of reality and experience and awareness? And she said that's exactly what she sees is happening on this planet right now. And in a way, it does seem like that we're getting more and more polarized on this planet between some individuals that seem to have no clue of this greater awareness, that are very much into 3D, and others that say, I can't stand it. I can't bear even looking at this kind of limited thinking and aggression and behavior, because it is so alien, and I use that word deliberately, so alien to how I think and feel and be, and the pain that they feel by witnessing that, and the sadness and actually the trauma, because of them being more and more aware of our connectedness, in fact, has become very painful for many people, and and also them getting very, very depressed, because it's really hard to maintain that higher frequency when you have all this fear and terror and abuse going on across this planet right now.
I can definitely relate to that.
Mm.
Wow.
It's difficult.
Yeah. I have the privilege, we have a metaphysical boutique in Brooklyn, and some of these young people are coming to the shop and seeking a conversation, and maybe they're going to buy a crystal, but what they really need is to be witnessed, to know that they can talk to someone who at least can maybe perhaps understand them a little bit. And I know that there's been times where I have felt outside my comfort zone, because there's little beings coming into the shop that are so psychic, that are seeing energies coming and emanating from crystals that I can't see, that are smiling and giggling at me because, saying, oh my God, don't you notice that you keep tipping over? I'm like, yeah. I'm losing my balance. She was like, well, there's this big butterfly flapping its wings next to you. And it's those moments where a bigger sensitivity needs to come into the awareness where, you know, there these kids, I'm seeing them going through the public school system, for example, and feeling so disconnected. Some of them are throwing up before they even go to school, or they're feeling like there's so much energy in their body and they don't know where to place it. And then you have what seems to be so many labels attached to these kids. And I know that you have so much research in your in what you've been uncovering with people who have been labeled ADHD and people who have Asperger's and autistic. And if you can speak a little bit about that.
It's a very good question, and it's really been interesting for me as a researcher trying to understand what's going on, and what actually is the purpose of our interactions with these beings. What are the programs? What are the agendas? And what was the clue was that those families that were having experiences, and it was apparent that each generation was being upgraded, but then their children may be labeled as ADHD or Asperger's or, a form of autism or dyslexia. And I mean, it may even be bipolar as well. I'm not sure. That's another possibility. And I'm thinking, well, if they're upgraded and yet they're having what appears to be dysfunctional children, or they're considered dysfunctional, that doesn't make sense. Logically it doesn't make sense. So what is really going on? And I had a number of clues, and that's what I love about, this whole journey of us putting the jigsaw together, was when I was speaking to a lovely gentleman in Hong Kong. I spoke there a number of years ago, and the researcher Neil Gold, who is a ufologist and an experiencer, he actually explained to me that he didn't realize that he was ADHD until he was in his 50s. And he said, and yet I always saw reality differently, and I never knew why, and it was like there was something wrong with me. He now realizes that he was seeing far more of the multidimensional nature of reality, and he's redefined his ADHD as always dialed into higher dimensions. So he understood then that the reason that he was like that was because he was already crossing the bridge into his multidimensional experience. And this is what is going on. And Tracy Taylor talked about them operating differently, that they, have a higher frequency. So they're already, in that new reality more than they are in 3D. And the same goes with the Asperger's. What we're finding with autistic children is that many of them are actually telepathic, and they're operating with a different part of their brain. There's some fascinating research that is showing that, and one of them was a link that I only had recently of a young autistic girl that the parents thought that she was, mentally underdeveloped and that she wasn't able to understand anything. When she finally was able to connect and tell them through computer what she was really experiencing, they realized how intelligent she was. And she was saying, when I look at someone, I get 1,000 pictures of that person when I'm looking at them in one instant. And that's why sometimes I can't look at people, because it's too much information. What it's really saying is they're seeing more of the hologram, more of the quantum reality that is our real reality, not just the 3D. So they're getting all this input we don't understand. We just think they're behaving badly. They're actually being overwhelmed by input and don't always know how to deal with it. What is that telling us? This is the upgrades. The clues are all there, and that's why I've written it a holistic way of understanding that these are new programs. We've now, instead of seeing them as dysfunctional, we've got to see them as having an accelerated way of perceiving a broader spectrum of reality, and that's where we're going. They're showing us where we're going, and that's what ultimately will be our heritage too. Their DNA is more activated. They have access to more information because they're the more activated ones. And this is what I talk about in The New Human. That's where we're going. And we're the old models. We're the ones that have been programmed so heavily that we have shut down those abilities and that awareness that is also intrinsic within us as well. But we're seeing that, these children are being born everywhere, and they're having these labels, which really are not dysfunctions at all. They're just new programs. And the whole idea is, I believe, and the one that's most logical, if you see, if you like, a species that's been programmed into a reality that is so limited they can't access who they are and access their multidimensional abilities because they're told that if they are experiencing there's something psychologically wrong with them, or they're ill, or that that it's a mental aberration. You're not going to admit that you're experiencing other things. So the whole idea is that these children are harder to program. And what do we do with ADHD? We dose them up to slow them down so that they can be programmed. As this 9-year-old in Northern Europe, I call her Kathy in my book, said, she said the trouble is with schools that the teachers, she said, the star children are coming in, and the teachers with the curriculum are programming them out of their light. In other words, they're shutting them down, and the teachers then just press the keys. So what it's doing is that the general standard education is literally shutting you down into a program that only allows you to honor your 3D reality, when in fact what it's really meaning is it's shutting you down spiritually and emotionally and psychologically from your spiritual heritage and your, if you like, your cosmic heritage, which says that we actually are amazing. This Kathy told me, Mary, human beings are amazing, but they've got to believe it first. And the trouble is we're programmed.
Ooh. Hello?
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 Did you get that?
Oh.
No, we missed the last part.
Oh, okay, sorry. What I was saying was that Kathy was saying that human beings are actually quite fantastic, quite amazing. And she said that we've got to believe it first, though, and we're programmed out of that belief, of course, by the educational systems that we have in Western society.
And I would add also, I'd like your opinion. Do you believe that the mass vaccination program and all the vaccine injuries that are related are also affecting how kids are able to naturally progress through their own conscious evolution?
Absolutely. It's really hard bringing in what people see as the conspiratorial side of this, whether we like it or not. This isn't a theory; it's a fact. That the preservatives in a lot of the food now are harmful. We do know that fluoride's a neurotoxin, and that goes into lots of people's water. Yeah, they say it's great for teeth, but you're just going to be very dumb. They don't tell people that, of course. The other thing is we know these huge amounts of vaccines that people are being told are absolutely necessary, and with them goes, of course, aluminium and all these kinds of other products in them as well, and the amounts of mixes as well. Go into it, I say to people. Go and look at the facts before you believe everything you're seeing on the television. Look at least into it before you do that. Chemtrails are another one. I mean, it's horrific, the kinds of things that are around us now, certain of the microwaves, all these kinds of things that we're being exposed to are all shutting us down and keeping us in the box. And the more you become aware of that, then you can at least take certain, start to eat more healthily, hopefully, grow your own food if you can, because at least it's not going to have the preservatives and the chemicals and all the rest of it. And many people who are being activated or awakened, that's what they're doing. They're moving into rural areas. They're growing their own food. They're avoiding some of the traps that trap you into the 3D world and the fear-based structure of that, where you're being continually told that if you do this, something's going to happen to you. We're kept in this whole, if you like, frequency of fear, so that we won't actually expand and grow. And it's happening through all the different, through education, through some of the religions. It's happening through, medical science, which has become more of a drug vehicle more than anything else. I mean, it's no longer about healing. It's about suppressing and putting drugs in somebody's body, which only creates more problems. There's no longer, and anyone who's naive to believe that a lot of the governments are there to serve them. In fact, the governments there are to serve themselves. And I mean, wake up and smell roses, guys. Anyone with half a brain, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to see this and see what's going on, that everything is self-serving now. It isn't about the benefit of humanity. It's about self-serving. And this is what we have, and this is what has to change. The children know it. What is wonderful about these children is they can look at you and they will know whether you're lying, because a lot of them are telepathic. You're going to have to watch your thoughts, guys. You're going to have to walk your talk if you really, want this planet to change in its consciousness, because these children will know. They know they're being lied to. They know about the covert programs. That's what I write about in my book, is what the children know. They know about the fact that the moon is artificial, that there are beings under the surface. They know there's life under the surface of Mars. They've been taught all of this. Things that, are being confirmed by whistleblowers now. These children know it. They know about the damage that's being done as this 9-year-old, I mean, she's not 9 anymore, knows what the schools are doing and what the programs are to shut you down. This is what the children are saying to me and telling me, because they can't be conned, because they're already seeing and knowing and sensing it, where a lot of us have lost the ability to actually realize how programmed we really are.
And Mary,
Absolutely.
one of the things that I ask myself all the time is, like, what's the solution for parents that are already so overwhelmed, maybe working more than one job, and understanding that maybe their kid isn't resonating with the school? Is homeschool something that they really need to consider? And that's not like there's not a plentiful option with homeschools. I know that more and more people are creating it, but there's so many systematic things with the schools, and even laws lately, and little things that have been introduced into legislation to sort of create this more of a system where the school is almost owning your kid. Even like forcing vaccinations, and you don't even know that they're being vaccinating during school time.
I know. And this is what has to change. I mean, at the moment, one of the best options is homeschooling, if it's possible, but the whole system is geared to getting both parents working, and the children then under the umbrella of care centres, et cetera, because it means you've got less and less input in what your children are learning or who's influencing them. And more of the controls are coming in as soon as your child is in another environment that isn't a home environment. So that's part of the issue for sure. And the trouble is that, although I will say this that may give some heart, when I was talking to a 12-year-old, she was telling me that when she's in the classroom, her fairies come in and actually give her information if what she's being taught is inaccurate. So she's actually being told by the fairies, that's not true, this is the truth of that, and this is the information you need to remember. Another little girl actually told me that she's aware of one of the little greys in the classroom with her who does a similar thing. So, some of them are being helped by these non-physical intelligences, what to learn and what not to learn, and the truth of things. You will find a lot of the star kids or starseeds and the new generations are really avoiding school. They just don't want to go there and find it very difficult to be in an environment where they're being taught, as far as they're concerned, absolute rubbish. And a lot of them are bailing from school and truancy from school as well because they just can't deal with it. The truth is that we've got to completely change the way that we look at these children as us knowing information to pass on to them. It's actually the other way round. It's about these children teaching us what they need to be as expanded and to come and do whatever it is they've come here to do. So it really is a reversal of roles. The only role that as adults we need is to provide the environment, the caring, loving environment for them to expand in their abilities and to help them understand the 3D reality. But in fact, they'll be teaching us. And this is what this 9-year-old told me, that her brother, who was only a toddler, was going to teach her, but she was going to teach and awaken her mother and others. So they're fully aware that this is, their mandate, their mission. But at the moment we're in transition, of course, and so it sometimes seems absolutely overwhelming that, that we've got all this other self-serving agendas going on. But things are changing. More and more people are waking up. And as they wake up, that frequency that they hold is being shared all the time. Those that have this awareness, wherever you go, that frequency is being picked up and it's affecting people. And this is shifting the consciousness, which is part of how it's all working. So, just by being, authentic, you are shifting and changing those around you wherever you go. And that's an important part of it. We think we've got to keep doing things. Just being in that frequency is changing things.
And I have a few more questions. I know that we need to start wrapping out soon, but I know that within some of these close encounters and experiences, there are people who are MK Ultra, My Lab, there may be government intervention. How, from your perspective, and what you've been uncovering, what have you discovered in that realm? What is that looking like?
Well, there's no doubt that a lot of these children, for example, have been picked up, abducted. They have the same kind of technology as many of the extraterrestrials to do that. And they will try and shift them and make them available to them. And there's a really powerful story of that in, I think it's chapter 8, of a young 9-year-old that explained to me how his experience of being taken to an underground base. And it was quite chilling to hear this 9-year-old explain to me that he was fully aware of what they were doing. He was sitting in a chair, a special chair. There was technology, a kind of technology to one side of him. He was explaining that the lady in front of him was wearing a black kind of uniform, and she was actually trying to lower his frequency so that she could find out what he knew and also to put information in his head. And he was aware of it enough to most of the time to keep his frequency higher so she couldn't do it. So he was absolutely aware of the agenda, what she was trying to do and what he needed to do to stop that happening. But he's aware, he told me, that there are places around this planet where these kids are taken and where they're telepathic and abilities, their paranormal abilities we would call them, learning to walk through solid objects, this kind of thing, is what they're being taught at 6 and 7 and 8. And I've even talked to others that are adults that have experienced when they were that age of being taken to these underground bases and being taught these things. So they're trying to utilize the abilities and make them available to their agendas. That is something that is going on as well. And fortunately, for all of those that get caught up in that, there are others that are aware of it and actually are able to avoid being pulled into it. But I suppose that's part of the soul journey of the individual, what choices or what part they play in this whole shift of awareness and consciousness. We're dealing with duality. We're dealing with learning to know and understand what love is and unconditional love is, and acceptance that we're all connected. In the reverse of that is the lack of and the self-serving. All of that is part of the bigger journey that we're all on as souls, isn't it, to experience. And for some of us, we make choices because that's what, at that time, the soul wishes to experience. So there's a bigger agenda than even the extraterrestrial one or the interdimensional one, which is, where I come from in terms of my perspective is, what is the soul journey for you? And it may be that this lifetime is about being in 3D and being self-serving. That's your journey. And for somebody else, they're saying, no, my journey is that I want to now ascend into a greater reality and experience where I know I'm connected to everything and that everything is part of me. And that's what some of the I think the understanding is coming through with those that are finding this transformation through their experiences come to understand.
Thank you. My other question is about cosmic disclosure, taking it into your own hands.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts about that? I mean, I know that you're doing it. I know that there are other approaches that they're trying and waiting and hoping that maybe a government will confirm it officially. What are your thoughts?
Look, I think the problem is with public disclosure. If somebody's waiting for the White House to come out and say this is a reality, I think they'll be waiting a long time. There is a slow release of information that's desensitizing the public, I think, in many ways, through the deliberate whistleblower disclosure, and also through many of the films that we're seeing now and the documentaries. There's little bits being desensitizing the public, but I feel that the real disclosure will come from the ground up. That it's more and more of us. The everyday people, the people that are having these experiences who are gradually coming out of the space closet, as I call it, and they're the ones that I think will change the tide to this, uninformed planet, if you like, the ones that are still unaware that this is a reality. And one of the fascinating things is that seems to be more exponential in the new human. I've got, for example, a number of very, professional academics and even a medical doctor that has come out of the space closet, if you like, and owns their experiences. And it's hugely courageous to do it because we're still, a lot of people still struggle with this reality, but they have been prompted to disclose their story. And Dr. Lena Olson is a molecular biologist who is also, a scientist and an experiencer with many different types of intelligences. And to come out in Sweden is a big deal because they're very close to this, and the judgment is huge. She heals, she does healing, she's an amazing lady. She was prompted to come out through an instant healing by the beings, the mantid beings, who she interacts with, along with, a number of other beings and intelligences. And the medical doctor is a lady, was activated in India, and she now does shamanic healing, working with the DNA, and she tells her story in my book about how she's now become a shamanic healing, working with activating the DNA and clearing the old programs, et cetera, and this is a hugely brave thing to do as a medical doctor, to come and own that you now are working multidimensionally. I talked about the Christian minister of 40 years who's now owning his experiences for the first time in my book, for example. So there's a lot of very brave souls that are coming out, owning who they are and saying this is my reality. And the great thing with what you're doing, and the reason I do these interviews more than anything, is when people can hear for themselves that they're not the only ones experiencing something, that some of the things they've experienced, are being experienced by a number of other different individuals or many other individuals. It gives them the power to say, you know what, if they can do it, so can I. And that's really how it happens. The more we talk about this, the more we normalize it, the more those that have been afraid to say that this is their experience changes it for them. And I still remember when I was in Norway a couple of years ago, and they're very afraid to talk about this if they've had experiences. And I was a bit worried about my kind of information, which isn't quite the standard UFO nuts and bolts, as you well know. And I wasn't sure of the audience's reaction. And what was fascinating was after the presentation, there were a number of people extremely emotional after hearing the information. And one of them was a lady who came up to me and she said, I'm 79 years old and you are the first person that has explained to me all the experiences I've been experiencing all my life. I am a farmer's wife, and I used to call the sheep in with my mind, and nobody knew how I did it. Everything you've spoken about, she said, I've experienced, but you are the first person that I have heard it from. And for her, it was an enormously emotional and validating time, but she had to wait till she was nearly 80 to get that validation. And this is why it's so important what you're doing and others like you are doing by disseminating this information, because it's making it okay to be who you are and to be authentic and to say, you know what, if others can do it, so can I.
And it's tremendously healing for the person, because they, you agonize when you are labeled and when you're afraid to speak of your truth. So the amount of healing that occurs because of the work you're doing, Mary, is incredible.
Well, I think I particularly recall a particular email to me, and that has stuck in my mind. And it was one where I got the subject matter was, you saved my life. And I thought, well, that sounds very dramatic, until I read the email. And this lady was saying that she was in the process of considering suicide. She had felt so alone, so isolated, so different. She felt that there was no way she could ever relate to people on this planet, that there was no point in living anymore. Life was too dark, and she was done with it. And she said, I literally had got to the point where I was going to do it. And she said, and I happened to listen to this radio interview where you were speaking about everything I'd experienced. And I remember thinking, well, if other people are like me out there, then I'll hang around. And she said, and that's exactly what happened, that it really allowed her to hang around and to find others like herself, because she realized that she wasn't alone. And that's it, isn't it? None of us want to feel there's just us, that there are others like us that are feeling the same way, and that we can be understood. And unfortunately, in present society, it's still not okay to say this is how you feel. But fortunately, more and more are owning their experiences, and there's websites now talking about this, and people are connecting. And this is how the shift will happen, is as we connect and as we share and we open up and be authentic, then this is how it will happen. And, I was, when I first started speaking about this, I was very careful, particularly speaking to the media and particularly in interviews, even though I knew a great deal more. I was very careful how I, what I put in my presentations. Now I put it all out there. I don't mince my words. I say it how I understand it, and I think there'll always be people out there that get it, even with the most challenging information, the most unusual. There'll be somebody out there that will get it. And so I don't edit. I don't edit the information, and that was why I wrote The New Human, because I didn't want to edit the stories. I wanted the people to tell their stories, how they understood it, no matter how bizarre or unusual other people found it. Because I said in the conclusion that we live in a reality dysfunction, and that we've got to realize that present understanding of reality is a limited construct, and that when we start to open up, we are then seeing far more of the hologram. And the only way we're going to understand who we are is when we own the hologram and realize that, there's a big elephant out there, and we've all got bits of it. It doesn't mean, it's still the elephant. We can't see all of it, but we can only see bits of it due to our programming, due to our beliefs, due to what holds us back. But the more that we are open to possibilities, to the things that challenge us, if something challenges you, I will say to your listeners, then don't run away from it. Actually look at why it challenges you, because it may be something you don't know you need to know. And I always say I don't know what I don't know. And that is why, no matter how bizarre, unusual, or strange the information, I will look at it, even though I won't necessarily take it on board. Because being open-minded doesn't mean you're gullible. It just means you're open-minded. You don't have to believe everything until you've qualified it or quantified it in some resonance or some way. But at least be open to what you don't know. that way is the only way, I believe, to grow and to become more aware.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mary. And this has been such an illuminating discussion on many levels, and I'm really grateful for your time and presence today. Are there any ways that besides, and you have, there are so many articles, there's the books that you have written, the presentations and the interviews that I have online. Uh, if somebody wants to contact you directly, can you speak on some of the services that you offer?
Look, it's very easy, apart from, Googling me and seeing all the presentations, and I've done many, many interviews, which will give you a broad overview. I've got two websites. One of them is www.maryrodwell.com.au. Another one is ACERN, which is www.acern.com.au. So those are the main ones, and it's got contact on there where you will actually get directly to me with an email and what have you. I'm on Facebook as well. And I'm also involved with an organization called the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, which is known as FREE. And that is part of the research side that we're doing now with the surveys are in various languages. We're hoping to make it absolutely global, where we're collating the data now on what all these multidimensional experiences are, from extraterrestrial contact. People are having contact after having near-death experiences. People are having contact after shamanic experiences, for example, Kundalini awakening, spiritual practices. So it's not just through, sighting a UFO or being taken up on a craft. It can happen through any of these kinds of ways. What I'm seeing is that this is a consciousness shift. So, it may be, as I say, through a near-death experience that you start to interact with non-human intelligences. But if you want to contact me or share your story or to have some understanding, then go to my websites and you will see the contact details.
Thank you. Ruthie, do you have any last questions?
Oh, well, there's so many questions, and we could talk all day, and I don't want to impose on your graciousness on your time. But I just want to say that I enjoyed so much this conversation, and it's just the beginning, because there's so much more to learn. And the most important thing is how much I appreciate the work you're doing and the healing that you're assisting throughout this whole world.
Oh, thank you for that generous comment. I'm actually very grateful for individuals like yourselves, because your dedication to getting information out that is helping people to grow and to heal and to become who they are. And it's through that kind of vehicle that people are getting the healing that they need as well. So we're all working in the same theme, really, which is to assist each other to become all that we can be, and to be at peace with that. And for that, I honor both of you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It has been a delicious way to wrap up our Monday evening, and it's Tuesday morning in Australia, right?
Yes.
That is so awesome. This has been an unbelievable experience. I'd like to wrap up with a quote from Nikola Tesla. It is paradoxical yet true to say that the more we know, the more ignorant we become in the absolute sense, for it is only through enlightenment that we become conscious of our limitations. Precisely one of the most gratifying results of intellectual evolution is the continuous opening up of new and greater prospects. Thank you, Mary, for coming on Cafecito Break podcast today and bringing us so many more pieces that we can utilize in our personal journeys to have a bigger conversation or a bigger piece to this big puzzle that we're living in. Many blessings to you and the work that you're doing. And I'm really feel very gracious to know that people like you exist and are doing such precious work to help heal humanity. Thank you, Mary.
And thank you both. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Many blessings,
blessed
and any time that we would love to have you on the podcast in the near future.
Oh, thank you both. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you again.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Cafecito Break for this special time frame. This was such an amazing conversation. I realized that I hung up on Ruthie. Sorry, Ruthie. Guys, thank you again. Share this conversation far and wide with your family, with your tribe. We covered a lot of important conversations today. And thank you for witnessing us here at Cafecito Break. Please subscribe to our Cafecito Break YouTube channel. We are also on VidMe, and then the main way to access our podcast and will always be our home, cafecitobreak.org. Many blessings, guys. I love you. Walk safely on this beautiful journey, and I will see you soon.